well, as Head of Department of Geography, can I add my own warm welcome to you all for coming today. As a Head of a Geography Department, it's probably no surprise, given the subject which has enormous reach, almost an unbounded reach across academic and practical disciplines, that I'm often called to introduce topics which I know relatively little, if anything, about. I am a physical geographer myself who has worked on water supply and ecology in cities, but I'm essentially a river scientist. And I thought, well, if I introduce this topic today, this seminar, this think piece, this thought experiment today with Joseph, what can I actually say? Well, it seems to me that you are, in a sense, a collection which I increasingly think of as the Illuminati of urban studies, if I can put it that way. We've got theoreticians and academics. We've got people who plan. We've got people who engage with planning and deliver that planning in reality. We've got people here who are used to user access, to stakeholder involvement, politicians, really at the interface between that. So we've not only got multiple disciplines, but we've actually got multiple perspectives on those disciplines, and people at different strategic positions in policy making and delivery. Now, it's our ambition as a geography department to put our own multidisciplinarity to the test, to work as interdisciplinary teams, and therefore to address questions which are increasingly of scale and scope to be transdisciplinary. And I can think of no better instantiation within the social, the economic and the environmental sciences as a potential transdisciplinary theme than cities, their sustainability, their potential as catalysts for economic change and sustainability, but also the aspects of cities within their regions and to what extent they help or hinder that. I can think of no finer person to, in a sense, to introduce intellectually and practically our first session than Sir Peter Hall, and it's a great privilege for me to be sitting to his right and to chair a session which he's going to begin. So I'll hand over to Peter.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, and can I add my welcome to those who've flown a long way or even shorter distances to this seminar. Welcome to London from I'm tempted to say the godless college up the road, whose banner is on the PowerPoint. I should also say you've had a health and safety warning. When I put this PowerPoint into this machine, instead of the normal warning, obviously, that the lawyers had told Microsoft to put in about enabling external content, instead I got a message saying that Microsoft had repaired my damaged PowerPoint. So something may have happened on the central line, which may be spectacular later on. But seriously, Joseph has raised, I think, a very important issue in his introductory few words, which is that something is happening deep in our cities in the developed world. And since Joseph represents the OECD, and principally I think we're talking about that world, I want to talk about Europe, because I've been involved for the past 5 years in a European investment and research project funded by the EU's Interreg 4B programme, which has involved 5 European regions, specifically in Northwest Europe. And I want to relate the issues that have come out of that work, which has been transport-oriented, to a debate which those of you from the UK, and I know that a substantial number of you are UK participants, but those of you from the UK will be all too familiar with, perhaps bored with, because it's hitting the headlines almost every day, which is the saga of our planned high-speed railway from London to the Midlands and north of England. Because I think putting these together, they raise very important issues of how we relate transport investment to the development of peripheral regions and peripheral cities within those regions. Now, I'm almost now embarrassed by the number of UK participants, because I'm now going to give you a mini lecture on a subject you know all too much about, which is the fact, and here we go again, Joseph, that we are revisiting something which first emerged in this country in the 1930s, which is the so-called north-south divide between London and the southeast on the one hand, and the older industrial regions and cities of the Midlands and north of England on the other. But, and the driver of this, as we can see, is the shift from the manufacturing economy, which already was observable, as you said, Joseph, in the 1930s, to something we now call the knowledge economy, or Professor Alan Scott, who I heard speaking in London yesterday, calls the cognitive cultural economy. And I think that's not a bad word, because it identifies what is the real root of urban growth and urban employment growth in countries like the UK and indeed every other European country, and I would argue every advanced post-industrial country, plus the geography of consumption that you can see all too well around you in a city like London, as high incomes pump their way through the economy into high consumption levels, whether these are luxury goods or luxury restaurants, further creating multiplier effects. But in this country, and I think in other countries, if I have the similar knowledge, there is a very important further set of distinctions. First of all, outside London, we have the so-called major core cities, generally in the old industrial Midlands and North, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, and so on. Secondly, within those old industrial regions, we have an increasingly complex geographical pattern, which it would take me about 10 minutes to describe. But it means that there are parts of what I call the south of England in the north, and vice versa. Go into the Ribble Valley of Lancashire and you will see a landscape that physically and culturally looks like Buckinghamshire down here, except it's got rather more hills. But the consumption patterns are those of Buckinghamshire, not of neighbouring Blackburn and Burnley. So we have the north-south divide, and Danny Dorling, who's just moved from Sheffield to become Professor of Geography at Oxford, has produced a new definition of that divide running from Hull on the Humber down to Bristol, Cardiff. And it's a rigorously defined divide, and I think most of us would buy it. But some interesting things and complex things are happening in that pink part of the Danny Dorling map. Now, what we find here, and apologies again to the UK participants, is that London is the only UK region that's punching above its weight. Look at the middle part of each diagram, and you'll see that London is way above the average of 171%. The southeast just makes it at 107. All the other regions of the UK are punching way below their rate. Furthermore, London is the only region that has at least one up index. The property prices were showing a down movement, not anymore, because this is already out of date, as you'll see, but all the others are showing massive losses. So there is a huge regional imbalance between London and to some extent the southeast and the rest of urban England. This is very recent from a week ago in the FT. This is what's happening now, and look at it. London property prices rising madly, nearly 10% in a year. The south generally okay, and then come down here, and property prices still declining in the northern regions. And every index tells the same story. This is my recent favourite from I think it came out last Saturday, Michelin-starred restaurants. If you want an index of the geography of consumption in this country, look at, whoops, where are we? Look at London Michelin-starred restaurants versus the rest of the UK. It is a staggering illustration of where the money is and where the money is being pumped round from high productivity, however we define high productivity in this cognitive cultural economy, point for discussion, into consumption. However, I have said that there's a more complex picture. And if you look at this map, you will see that although the warm colours are all in London and around it, in this so-called Golden Belt across the South Midlands, up in the north, if you can see it, you'll see the core cities punching above their weight. And that's the point. There is a more complex picture up there. And the real problem, which I want to point to you, is the poor performance of pockets of the north. And I could point you to similar distinctions in France and in Germany. The old one industry, sometimes two industry towns and cities, outside the core cities, are the truly poorly performing areas. And if I had another 10 minutes, I would bombard you with figures from our index of multiple deprivation, which is a very fine composite index, which shows you just how bad things are in those pockets in the north. Now, against this, we have this almost bizarre debate, because it's becoming so politicized in recent weeks, the proposal to bring the north of England closer to the south by a new 400-kilometre-an-hour railway, a self-contained new line running at very high speed and cutting journey times by about a half between London and cities like Manchester and Leeds, but terminating so far at the buffers in stations in the core cities, e.g. Manchester and Leeds, where those cores of those core cities are performing rather reasonably well anyway, and failing to connect with the regional rail networks outside those places, connecting the core cities with these problematic towns. And so the title I might have given this lecture is the need to integrate different forms of transport, high speed, regional, local, in order to irrigate the regions, a marvellous term which, as you would know, Joseph, the French invented, and which I think we need to borrow because it expresses a very important complex concept. Now, it's interesting in the what I'll call the High Speed 2 saga that the appraisal criteria have somewhat altered. Originally, 6 months ago, the case was almost exclusively based on speed. Then the cost of the project escalated suddenly over the summer by 10 billion to 42.6 billion. The project is threatened because all party support is threatened 2 weeks ago in the Labour Party conference. Now increasingly the case is based on capacity of the railway system, but also, very importantly, on indirect impacts, the impacts that the railway could have on development and regeneration. And it's this that forms another part of the text for this talk, because it raises the question of how we appraise any kind of form of transport investment, whether it's a new high-speed line or a local tramway. What we are seeing is that High Speed 2 has been based on an argument of time savings. In fact, more than half, 56% of all the benefits are said to be time savings to passengers. But the opposition are saying that these are business travellers who work productively on trains at their laptops and their tabs and their smartphones, and therefore time is spent productively, and in fact there is no case for time savings, although I should say, no one seems to have said this, that by going faster you could have more productive time for face-to-face meetings when you get to where you're going, but that's another matter. And so the indirect benefits become much more important. But we, as you well know, Joseph, you're experienced in OECD, these are terribly difficult to calculate. And we have a rather amusing and embarrassing situation in my department at UCL, where my colleague John Tominey is writing very frequently to say that high-speed lines may actually damage the economies of provincial regions and cities by exposing them to additional competition from stronger places like London. Whereas my recently graduated PhD student, Chia-Lin Chen, has done research, and we've published it together, arguing strongly that provincial cities in the UK and France have benefited economically from high-speed rail connections. Now, you can take the Tominey argument, you can take the Chen and Hall argument, but they're incompatible. And the real question does remain, what about the remainder of the regions outside the major core cities? Because Chia-Lin Chen's work was actually done mainly on core cities. And this introduces the project that, as I said, we've been working on with colleagues from mainland Europe over the past 5 years, Syntrofa. It's a terrible acronym. Those of you who worked in the EU vineyards will know the first thing you have to do is invent an incomprehensible acronym, and this stands for, wait a minute, Sustainable Integrated Tram-Based Transport for Peripheral European Regions. I think I got that right. Anyway, it involves 5 regions and 14 partners, and it involves managing a lot of money, which is a bit of a daunting experience. These regions are peripheral in the sense that they're actually poorly served by rail and air links, and particularly they're somewhat bypassed by the emerging European high-speed rail network. And the idea is to try and demonstrate the potential of new transport technologies, especially but not exclusively tram trains. And if you don't know what a tram train is, you'll find out very shortly. Here is a map many of you will know, which is the emerging European high-speed rail network of the year 2020, and it will probably get done. It's taking shape. And but the important argument, which was first of all made by 2 well-known German researchers, Klaus Spiekermann and Michael Wegner, nearly 20 years ago, is that as you actually shrink the time distances between the main cities of Europe, so you peripheralize the rest of Europe, you get these long arms extending out. And that, I think, still remains a terribly important argument. Plus the fact that if you go to the well-known concept in EU literature, particularly the Espon studies, of the Pentagon, this central core region of Europe, which is the dark grey bit of this map, basically London, London, Hamburg, down to Munich and Milan. This new rail system is brilliant at connecting these cities, as many of you will know, because you will have used it to get from one or other of these cities to another. But it leaves holes even within the Pentagon. And the map of the 5 regions you now see that have been collaborating on this project comprise the Fylde coast, which is on the periphery of northwest England, an area called West Flanders in Belgium, on the Belgian coast, Valenciennes in France, in the north of France, an old manufacturing and coal mining town, and also Nijmegen on the far east border of Holland, very close to the German border, and finally Kassel, or we call it Nordhessen because that's a technical regional term, but it's basically Kassel, which has pioneered the concept of tram trains as a means of regional development, built around a new high-speed train stop, and actually using tram trains to extend the benefits to a wider region. Let me give you the Castle story very quickly, because I believe it's a very interesting one. In 1991, they opened really the first true high-speed line in Germany from Hanover to Würzburg, and it had a new station in Kassel, rendering the old train station of the city centre more or less redundant. Then what happened was, here's the train station, they decided to borrow a concept which had been already developed in the German city of Karlsruhe successfully, and started a tram train service which actually connects this new station with the old station, but also all other parts of the region. And here is the what they call the regional tram network, connecting through these two train stations. And rather interestingly, technical feature, because they had a problem with a tunnel on one of the lines, they had to ask Alstom, the manufacturers, to put in a diesel version, which I'll illustrate. The whole system opened with great fanfare 6 years ago in 2007, on the 19th of August. And here you can take a brief ride. This is not a regional tram, but a Kassel City tram in blue, going to the new train station, Village Tour, but coming in behind it, not far, is the Regio tram, the silver Regio tram, which is stopping to pick people up outside the city hall. Lots of shoppers here, and it's just going to turn right and then turn left and go down a long incline under the old central station. Lo and behold, it comes out into the central station, and a minute later, in this particular version, the pantograph comes down on top, and the diesel engine springs into life, and off we go again under our own powers onto the railway tracks. On we go, soon, within about 10 minutes, into deep countryside, actually, a single track line meandering through open country. We stop to allow a train to pass because this is what in the jargon is called interoperation, very importantly. Ordinary rail trains operate on it. The driver is looking to see that everyone's safely on board, and off we go again into the final station. It's mid-afternoon, and the German schools work early, so the school kids all leave, and the train is ready to go back under its own power into Kassel. This was the model which we said in 2008, let's see whether we can apply this model to extend the benefits of high-speed rail into peripheral regions. And here's what happened in each case. As you may imagine, life's not simple. Not everything went 100% right. On the coast of Flanders, you have a remarkable tramway. It's 70 kilometres long, and because Belgium doesn't have much coast, it actually goes almost from one end of the Belgian coast to the other end. And it's been modernised, and it's a great tourist attraction. The central station, importantly, is at Ostend, where intercity trains come in, including one or two that are technically high-speed trains. It's been comprehensively modernised, very nice trams, as you see here, and it's a huge tourist attraction. And they wanted to extend it inland to connect with a branch railway line. Here's computer-generated imagery of what it's all going to look like, but I have to tell you, they haven't started building it yet. The idea was to use this as a basis for comprehensive regeneration around the couple of major train stations. And it's produced one rather new interchange station, but basically the extension hasn't been started. Now, in Valenciennes, they already had one tram line, and they proposed to build another, a long one, 30 kilometres long, extending from the northern edge of the Valenciennes city region, close to the Belgian border, all the way through the city centre, going eastwards, all on single track with passing loops. The interest here was in the technology. This is how it will work when it finally gets opened in February. It's been delayed, but it's ready for opening in February, and we are waiting all the God to see how this technology works. But unfortunately, one little complication in that they have built, almost finished this northern arm, but the second bit of it, they've delayed through a variety of regions. This would have gone east and across the Belgian border to Quiberon, where it was connected with the Belgian railway system. And the important argument here was, and still is, that if you could get this tram across the border, connecting with direct trains to Brussels, the booming Brussels economy would provide a lot of jobs in the growing, whatever you want to call it, knowledge, cognitive, cultural economy, for people in Valenciennes who haven't got those jobs in Valenciennes. Unfortunately, that's been delayed, as said, for a variety of reasons, but that was the concept. That's the derelict track across the border, and that's the rather clapped out Quiberon train station from which you can get a rather slow train meandering through Mons to Brussels. So that's Valenciennes. Nijmegen-Kleve, again a peripheral city on the edge of the Netherlands. The idea here, very ambitious, was to connect through to Kleve on the German side down here, and to a line that would take you, that's an old map showing the line, take you right through to Düsseldorf. This is the abandoned line again, about halfway across to the German border. This is what they plan for it to look like when it's restored. But there was one complication. A major justification here was to connect across the border into a major airport in a place called Weeze, otherwise known as Niederrhein, which is a big Ryanair operation, a low-cost airport. In fact, hapless passengers who arrive in Düsseldorf thinking they're actually going to Ryanair Düsseldorf find that they're actually not going there but going to Weeze, which is a very long ride indeed, but that's life with Ryanair. And anyway, the problem was that the consultant study showed that it wasn't going to work for a variety of reasons I could explain. What this exposed, though, was a very important question I'm going to raise in a minute, which is the relative value of what I'll call thick connections through a big hub, in this case Arnhem, on the main line from Amsterdam to Düsseldorf, and thin connections, in this case from Nijmegen through that branch line to Düsseldorf. Now finally, coming back here to the UK, Blackpool, which I must say happened to be my old hometown as a child, which is one reason I got interested in this project. This is a classic English seaside resort of the Victorian era that was hugely challenged by the jet age. This shows the Blackpool Central Station around 60 years ago, taken from the top of the Blackpool Tower. Huge capacity, huge crowds coming in on the railways for their week's holiday from the industrial towns, and then the whole thing began to close down. The station closed. It actually became a vast car park because very ingeniously they turned the railway line into a road, and for a while Blackpool thrived on day trips. But then Ryanair again began to threaten it, and a variety of reasons, not just Ryanair, but city breaks of all kinds, and the fact that people now have more sophisticated tastes in holidays, means that basically the economy went down the tubes, and this was a report from the Northwest Development Agency some 6 years ago. Soon the town will be on its deathbed unless action is taken. I spent 4 extremely frustrating years trying to chair an urban regeneration company up there, where we tried to get a mega casino up there, and it all failed because Tony Blair was replaced by Gordon Brown, and Gordon Brown, as the son of the manse, as we say, the clergyman's son, didn't like casinos. So Blackpool didn't get its casino. It's the 9th most deprived local authority in England. And here's an astonishing statistic. In that index of multiple deprivation I've been talking about, they have what are called local super output areas, which are tiny neighbourhoods. And of the 10 most deprived tiny neighbourhoods in England, 3 of them are in Blackpool, a town of 142,000. That tells you almost everything you need to know about what's happened to Blackpool. So what do you do? How could transport help? Well, here we go into the familiar story. 2 train stations, a big one that was left after this one shut, and all the connections there, a residual branch line coming around here. Our idea in Syntrofa was to connect the famous tramway, which you'll see in a minute, across here onto the railway line and run tram trains, castle fashion, to Preston to connect with the high-speed railway, the Pendolino service from Glasgow to London. And there is the present state of that branch line, and I can tell you it is an extremely dispiriting experience. I've ridden it many, many times, and I do not recommend it. However, next door is this famous Blackpool tramway, the oldest in the UK, the only to survive since 1885, recently upgraded at 110 million. There are the new trams that are running now, and as said, the proposal was to connect to the railway line and also to the Blackpool airport. But when the consultants got onto this, they found once again that the airport connection wasn't going to stack up economically. That, by the way, is the train station where the trams would actually come in. Oops, what happened? Yes, here we are. We're coming just from the right here onto the tracks. But it hasn't happened yet, because the consultants, it turned out, preferred the option of going through the big North Station. And that was a major subject of debate for us, because it raises the thick-thin connection argument once again. Blackpool are doing a major regeneration around that big station. It's just going up. I took this picture in June when we were up there, and it's all quite exciting. So what they want to do is extend the tram for a mere 600, 700 metres to this point to connect with the station. And we had to admit that this is a better option in the first instance, as a first priority. And what they showed in the consultancy studies is that the real traffic is through the North Station, with big flows to Preston, to connect with the Pendolino and Manchester. The South Line has an obvious break point halfway along, and the idea therefore was to bring the Blackpool tram in there and perhaps even interchange across the platform to this other line. But however, what really happened was that they argued that the business case was overwhelmingly favouring the North Station option, and here are the benefit cost ratios. Here's the North Station option, and then and here that's with the Talbot Gateway regeneration kicking in, and the other ones on the South Fard line are very poor. So we had to say, okay, go ahead with that interchange. Now, to sum up, we're almost at the end of the Syntrofa study, our final conference next February. The big issues are interoperation of trams and heavy rail, what you saw happening on that line in Castle, the relationship with the main hub, in particular the nearest major metropolitan centre, the potential to serve airports, the potential to trigger regeneration in the towns, and the motive power, that issue of diesel versus electric. Very quickly summarising this, interoperation, it can be done. In Kassel, you can go, and it's rather remarkable, you can get off a tram, and it's evidently a tram, and the tram whistles off, and 2 minutes later, a German ICE, a huge high-speed train, comes roaring through, and they can manage it on the German railways. But other places have rejected interoperation. They find it all too complex, and other places don't even seem to have considered it. On the Fylde coast, as you see, the consultants have preferred a straight connection through the big station rather than messing around with interoperation. And so we are a bit stuck on that particular issue. In relation to the main hub, and this is a critical dilemma, in 3 cases we find that there is this big choice between going through a big hub, and in this particular case, on the Flanders coast, it is Ostend here, rather than trying to make a connection here via this branch line to Brussels, which only has one very, very slow train indeed to Brussels once an hour. And it's amazing how often this branch line, the thin line, has a train once an hour, and it's very, very slow. And so you see the dilemma that there is a rather strong case, here's Nijmegen Klever, to go up to the main hub, in this case Arnhem, where there's a frequent high-speed train service from up here, or rather than, again, going to Klever, where there's 1 train an hour down to Düsseldorf. And here again, the Blackpool dilemma, which you've already seen. The relation to the airport, 3 separate studies in Kassel, in Nijmegen, Klever, and in Blackpool. Independent consultants concluded not much case for connection to a regional airport. That might surprise you, but one key reason is these airports are mainly low cost. People come to low cost airports mainly for leisure flying. What do? They take your kids and some bags, and you bring your car, and these airports make a lot of money out of car parking. So they don't even value the idea, in fact they very much don't value the idea of a new tram service competing with their parking revenue. In terms of motive power, Kassel was the only place that put in a diesel tram. It was then declared non-conforming by the EU because of new emissions regs, and we've gone round and round and round in circles with different possibilities. I must say this is still wide open. As of last week, they suddenly announced here that they were going to run a battery train on a branch line in East Anglia, and we woke up and got very excited and said, whoopee, this could be it. So still open as to what is the best motive power, because it saves a lot of money, of course, on electrification. Finally, of course, the development regeneration potential. Now this gets very complicated. If you go to Ostend and take that wonderful tram westwards, here are some of the views out of the tram window. There's been almost continuous regeneration along that line, in particular in 1 or 2 places. And our argument has been, if you can do this on the Belgian coast, well, the weather's very similar to the Lancashire coast of England, so why can't you regenerate the Fylde coast the same way? Well, it turned out when we got into it with our very well-informed Belgian correspondents that not everyone is pleased by what's going on, and this is a wonderful headline from a business page of a Belgian paper, Wind of Revolt on the concreting mayor. I love this term, the concreting mayor. It turns out the mayor has actually had a certain kind of financial interest in a lot of this that's been going on, and everyone isn't best pleased with the concreting mayor. But on the other hand, the concreting there did use a tax on second homes, and a lot of this development you see is second homes for people from Brussels to build this wonderful new train station. Well, we actually did contribute quite a bit of money to this out of the project. It's a very nice train station indeed, even although the train only comes once an hour. So these are some of the main conclusions. And the argument I developed with you out of this is that we actually need to borrow what I'll call the Heineken model. Now, some of you from the UK will remember this. It was said to be the most successful advertising campaign in all history, with the slogan that Heineken was the beer that reached the parts that other beers didn't reach. And we're arguing that you can develop transport to places that reaches the parts that other transport cannot reach, in particular these very peripheral urban places, and in particular by developing either tram train technology or BRT, bus rapid transit, which I must say is an emerging technology from which has been very successful, particularly in Latin America, which also is becoming interesting here. They've opened a very successful BRT system in Cambridgeshire, the longest in Europe, which has been very successful. Now, how long do we have?
5 more minutes.
5 minutes, okay. I will rip through the next 5 minutes. Here's one of the most remarkable urban success stories in Europe, in France. Montpellier, basically, the climate helped it. It's been the fastest growing city in France for the last 50 years, the fastest growing region. And I can't go through the detail, you can pick it up on the PowerPoint later. What they did here, and it's a very important argument, they extended the TGV, Paris to Lyon, 81, Paris to Marseille and Nîmes, 2001. From thence the train trundles along on the old slow tracks, but it gets there and it connects at the Montpellier train station with a very fast developing urban tram network. It's a remarkably successful network. Here it is blown up, with the third line just added last summer. Here's a picture of the two lines 1 and 2 connecting in front of the train station. And that funny gentleman in the big floppy hat in the middle of the picture, you might just recognize, Joseph. But there's line 3 coming through, just opened. What happened here is that the city used the first line in effect to extend the central business functions all along it, in particular to the west, new university facilities. It's one of the biggest university cities in France. And to the east, a whole new business admin centre and a new location for the university. And finally, an amazing fun city at the eastern end. At the western end, they've just opened this wonderful building by Zaha Hadid. It's an admin building called Pierre Vive, Living Stones. And at the eastern end, well, this is simply indescribable. You have to go and see it to believe it. They borrowed the concept from Florida, but they put a tram in the middle of it all, and it's been hugely successful, although opposed by the local Chamber of Commerce. And not content with that, they're going to put the new TGV station there, bypassing the city centre. However, the mayor, who was an amazing character, he died 3 years ago of a heart attack, he was amazingly popular and amazingly unpopular at the same time. He won every election, everyone hated him, and he brings in Christian Lacroix, the dress designer, to design the new Line 3 trams, and this was the headline in the Figaro, Joseph, you may remember it, which I very much like, and there is the high haute couture tram just whistling past the main train station on its way out on a new development corridor, so far almost completely rural, but they're planning to extend it even as far as La Grande-Motte on the Mediterranean coast. And this is what they are planning along this new tram corridor. And this is done, importantly, in France by the strong mayor of a strong city taking in on board the surrounding much weaker communes into a community to build these tram services. It's been very successfully used in Montpellier, but there is one final big question, which is the last bullet point. How far does such a system extend? And that is the big issue, because recent research by Xavier Desjardins from the Sorbonne suggests that in 3 French cities, basically the trams have done a wonderful job. The French have invested huge amounts of money in tram systems using a hypothecated tax that no one else has, but beyond the tram termini, his work shows that there is a chaotic pattern where a lot of the new development is taking place in locations that are not served by the rail corridors, and in effect, this is a non-sustainable pattern of development around French cities. Now, some exception to this is Lille, which is interesting because Lille is the French Manchester, the core city of a very problematic, perhaps France's most problematic old industrial region. And there, another brilliant mayor, Pierre Mauroy, who died recently, and was also Prime Minister of France in the way they do things there, managed to divert the new TGV line, the Eurostar line from London, through a new train station next to the city centre here, and but then used investment in new metro line and also modernisation of a tramway to connect this all with declining old industrial towns to the north of Lille. This is the terminus of the tramway at Roubaix, and that is the terminus of the metro, literally next door. That's the, I took a step or two back to catch this one, and bus connections to other parts of this city, which recent research, 2012, shows to be the poorest single major city in France. I have to say that it hasn't exactly done the trick, but they're working on it through major regeneration schemes carefully crafted to relate to the new transport. And I'm almost finished. Chia Lin, who I've mentioned already, in her PhD, has shown that the regional council in the north of France, the Nord-Pas-de-Calais, systematically used public money to exploit the opportunity of the new high-speed line from Paris. First of all, to develop new services direct from, not merely from Lille, but from selected problematic towns in the wider region, such as Dunkirk and Valenciennes and Lens, where they put the new branch of the Louvre, and connect directly with Paris, but also to develop a new regional high-speed train system connecting into Lille. And the important argument here is that they are saying we'll give these places an extra boost by the extra connectivity directly to Paris, but we'll also give them a boost in that unemployed people in these towns won't have to leave because they can in fact get the regional TGV to jobs in Lille within easy commuting time. And she has shown in her research that this has had definite effects in that region in comparison with northwest England, where the same kinds of places are actually still languishing in deep economic depression and multiple deprivation, because we have failed to integrate our region, whereas the French have integrated theirs. It hasn't come cheap. Now, finally, and this is the final slide, Manchester has invested massively French style in a new tram system. It's wonderful, but what happens beyond the end of the tram line? The answer is, as you've already seen, these cities are, the places in the wider region are not linked. This is research by Paul Hildreth, who's now a PhD student at UCL, and this is partially being remedied. At last, the government here have put money into electrifying the local regional system. But it still leaves untouched these branch lines, including that notorious South-Fylde line, are unelectrified in what we call part of a third circle. So in a related project, Synaptic, also financed by the EU, in June in Manchester, we proposed to take the electrification and superimpose on it a whole series of new opportunities. I'm sorry, something did go wrong at that point. But new opportunities which would actually extend the regional railway system out to these most deprived places. And that is still an item on the agenda, still to be undertaken. And that is where, at this point, we've left Syntrofa and also left Synaptic, but we hope to come back if we get a little more European money to take this work further. Sorry if I'm still slightly run over my time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, well, speaking as somebody who commutes more than 100 miles each way on the West Coast Main Line from the Midlands town of Nuneaton, I'm afraid my daily commute is now being ruined. Never again shall I just sit there sleeping or reading my Stephen King, but every mile I'll be trying to calculate the cost-benefit ratio of the transport link I'm enjoying. Anecdotally, since I started commuting 3 years ago, commuting has gone up by about 20%. Yes. The cost has gone up by about the same. Yep. And we lost our Marks and Spencers and now rejoice in having, I think, the biggest poundland in the Midland region. So there's an anecdote in there. Anyway, I'm not qualified to comment more, but Brian Field, who's senior economist of the European Investment Bank, is. And looking through his profile, he's another one who gives the lie to the fact that you can be or you need to be all kinds of, occupy all kinds of position in the urban theory and delivery. He's an academic, he's a practitioner, he's a policy maker, and I think now he's a policy facilitator. So Brian, for your comment.
Okay, I did prepare a presentation because I wasn't sure what I'd have to do. It'll be available for you at the end. I'm going to ignore my presentation and I'm just going to confine myself to a couple of comments because I very, very much enjoyed that presentation of Sir Peter's. I'd just like to make a couple of observations, two anecdotal, one of which I hope is amusing, and two a little bit more serious, of a technical nature. The first one on the it's made about acronyms. You know, when you're working in Europe, you have to have a dodgy acronym to define your activities. For my sins, I was the person that was nominated by the EIB to launch the Jessica initiative, which was an initiative launched in 2006 to help regenerate urban areas using new financial instruments facilitated by the structural funds. Jessica stood for Joint European Support for Investment in City Areas. The reason it was called Jessica was it was preceded by two initiatives. One was called Jeremy, and one was called Jaspers. Jaspers was a technical efficiency facility, and Jeremy was a facility to support SMEs. And the Commission had an intensive discussion at the end of 2006, the British presidency, because it was felt that an urban initiative was needed. And someone said, well, it's got to start with a J, it's got to have a nice acronym, and this time we need a woman. And someone said Jessica, and then they worked out what the rest for us was. And it stood for Joint European Support for Sustainable Investment in City Areas. I rather jokingly said, well, you know, this will be focusing on small scale projects. Maybe we need something that focuses on larger scale projects. How about Joshua? Joint operation to support huge urban actions. And the game continued. And after 2-3 years of working on this and people coming in with all sorts of new initiatives, I said, why don't we just scrap them all and just go with one acronym? We call it Jesus. And it stands for Joint European Support for Everything Under the Sun.
Very good.
That really found its way into the literature. But anyway, that's the first anecdote. The second anecdote is when I was a young man, and I'm a bit older than a lot of the people here, London was awash with trams and trolley buses. Most UK cities had trams and trolley buses, dedicated links that were performing the very same functions that we're now building trams to perform. And we got rid of them because there was an argument at the time that buses were far more flexible instrument. They didn't confine themselves to fixed routes. They were enabled to permeate or break into more isolated neighbourhoods more easily, and so on and so forth. It's interesting how times change, but we spent a hell of a lot of money dismantling the tram services and the associated trolley bus services. So maybe history has to tell us something. Okay, on the two technical observations, because I'm rushing a bit here because I'm conscious of the fact that people want to have some coffee and there'll be opportunity during the day to discuss things. I was quite taken by Davina's comments about the HS2 proposal and the appraisal methodology that is used to justify it. If you believe that holding cash and the amount of cash you hold is subject to the law of diminishing marginal utility, which some economists would disagree with, but I tend to think it is, then the distributional consequences of this kind of investment can have a profound impact on taking into account overtly the distributional consequences, can have a profound impact on the results of the analysis. Unfortunately, when we do the cost-benefit analysis for this type of investment, particularly in the transport sector, we simply focus on, we include lots of things, but the main focus is on time savings. The time savings are then normally aggregated. They're normally subject to an average wage rate. There's no consideration of the distributional consequences, and the net result is that you can generate enormous benefits on the basis of quite limited time savings. And it means that, if you need to, you can justify almost any project. What tends then to make the decision is not whether the project shows a very, very high rate of return, but whether or not the budget constraint within which the project has to be implemented is one that gives you sufficient capacity to implement the project. And what's interesting about HS2 is that the cost-benefit analysis is still positive, significantly positive, no matter how much the costs go up. But it's the budget constraint that is now being challenged. People are worrying about the fact that if we go ahead with this investment, it will be at the expense of other investments, and is this justified? Which brings me to a second point, which wasn't actually made explicitly by Peter, but I think it's the point that he's trying to make, is that these kinds of investment need to be policy-driven and planning-led. And we need to justify them because of the positive externalities that they generate. And even if we can't always quantify these in very straightforward terms to lend efficacy, shall we say, financial efficacy to the projects, we should nevertheless endeavour to do so, because the regeneration benefits can be quite significant. I prefer to think of major transport infrastructure investment in cities. I think we have to attempt to justify it financially, but I think infrastructure investment in general and transport infrastructure specifically needs to be evaluated as an agent for change. What it delivers to the city, to the community, to the region, to the areas at either end of the route. These are the things that matter. Remember, we don't demand transport for its own right. It's a derived demand. Transport is there for what we want to do at the destination end of our trip and for what's happening at the origin end of the trip. And we ignore this fact at our peril. So time savings, I think this HS2 debate has got a long way to go. So we need to have more holistic appraisal methodologies, and we need to consider the region implications, and I think that was a very important consequence of what Sir Peter said. And I'm just going to link that to my second observation, which is about finance. I work for the European Investment Bank, and we like to call ourselves a policy bank. In other words, we're delivering EU policy. We're not for profit, but we're also not for loss. We fund ourselves, it's not taxpayer money. So we apply normal banking criteria in our lending protocols. But we're policy driven, and the policy is one of convergence, cohesion in the EU. We're supposed to be focusing our attention on those areas that are deprived, that are disadvantaged, whether they're deprived regions or whether they're pockets of deprivation within cities. Now the problem is, these are the very areas where the risks are highest. And if you apply conventional banking protocols to lending and to investment in areas where the risks are highest, you immediately have a dilemma, because you're not lending money to areas of demand. And demand, I'm talking about demand in the Keynesian sense, which is wants and desires backed by the ability to pay. You're not applying your investment to those, or you're tending to focus your investment on those areas, rather than focusing your investment on areas of need, which is wants and desires not backed by the ability to pay. There might be some ability to pay, but there is quite often a shortfall. So we have this contradiction, and I think this links with Joseph's point at the very beginning. And I just want to read what he said, because I think it was very important. He said that what we've got at the moment is a crisis of decision making. Policy needs to be, and I've added that next to it, we've got a crisis of decision making because policy needs to be planning led. We need to be thinking in 10-year, 15, 20-year horizons for major infrastructure investment, and not in two, 3-year periods. Now with these contradictions that I've mentioned, where we're applying conventional risk analysis and conventional banking protocols to lending operations, in the crisis, rather than focusing on areas of most need, we're tending to come out of the crisis, or thinking that we can come out of the crisis, by focusing on areas of lowest risk, because there is a natural risk aversion that has permeated everything that's happened since the crisis. One of the most profound things that Keynes said in the general theory, and I started life as an economist, so I've studied a little bit about economics, is that the most important variable in economics is expectations. And expectations were shot to bit in the crisis. And this attack on expectations was reinforced by 2 or 3 years of constant bleating by everyone involved in the financial sector about the fact that it was going to get worse before it was going to get better. And everyone believed it. And I'll finish with this final observation about myself. In such a situation, I found myself in a situation where my mortgage repayments were cut by 2/3 because interest rates were at rock bottom. I was in a new environment where I was working for the European Investment Bank rather than getting an academic salary. You know, I was jetting around the world on expenses and not having to spend my own money. I'd never been richer in my whole life in terms of personal disposable income. And how did I react? Instead of investing, instead of buying, instead of moving into a bigger house, instead of buying fancy designer label clothes and what have you, I stuck the money under the pillow. I paid off all of my debts. I cleared all of my credit cards. I became paranoid about getting rid of debt because expectations were shot to bits. The fact is that during the crisis, everyone in employment has never been better off. The people who are paying for the crisis are the people who have had to accommodate change. And it's funny, but I think, fortunately, that we're coming out of that period now. And in Joseph's 10-year scenario, we're in the second half of the 10-year period, and we're moving into the period of adjustment. And it's interesting how much I'll use an American word because I don't think it exists in the English language, how much positivity there is in the media now about what's happening in the European economy. Not overly positive, but at least relatively positive. I'll leave it there.
Could I just, a 30-second comment on your comment? It so happened that Regional Studies Association, many of the members, had their annual presentations yesterday. And I found myself sitting next to Michael Heseltine, who I'd worked for 20 years ago, special advisor. And Michael said at one point to me, he said, in 1979, if I had said, or anyone had said, that we could go down into the Isle of Dogs and create what you see there, which is Canary Wharf, I would have been, or anyone, you would be taken away by kindly white-coated attendants. And I think that's worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks once more. Do enjoy tea and coffee. Do enjoy the rest of the day. And for those speakers coming in the session next, Federico will be at the front in about 15 minutes' time to make sure the PowerPoints are loaded and got into order. So thank you again.